Welcome to the show today, guys. Okay, so this is the first episode to our quote unquote Dear Sally segment of the podcast. If you guys didn't know, I have open submissions right now for you to submit anonymous questions, anonymous life decisions that you're pondering on to get feedback. It's the modern Dear Sally like they used to do with the newspapers. So we're jumping into a question today and I'm excited to dive in. It's all about how to handle being overwhelmed as a parent. Welcome to the Thought Vault, where we learn to unlock our minds to live with more purpose and bold intention. I'm your host, Emily Vermillion. Take a deep breath and let's get started. This is going to be such a good episode, so let's start off with me reading off the question to you guys. I am a mom to 2 little kids. I've been so overwhelmed lately and feel like I can't control my own emotions because all my energy goes into helping my kids manage theirs. Oh yeah, I'm so impatient and I'm having to say sorry a lot for being too harsh. Hard to admit that, but I'm just on the struggle bus lately. Would love some tools or help on how I can better manage myself. Thanks, overstimulated mama. Okay, well, I'm pretty sure I can start off by saying you are not alone. There's not a mom on this planet that can't relate to this, or a dad. There is no person that is capable of managing their own emotions and not being burnt out by having to keep up the life, the very existence of somebody else. It's no easy feat being a parent. The hardest job on earth. You're never going to convince me otherwise. So I know you're not alone, and so many of us can be like, yeah, raising my hand, I feel this too. This is like just normal. You're normal. So I just want you to feel like, I don't want you to think that you're not normal for being harsh or feeling overstimulated or honestly just completely burnout. It's normal. In a survey of 2020 by Pew Research, they said that 64% of mothers with children under the age of 18 reported that they had to cut back on their work hours, take a leave of absence, or quit their job altogether to care for their children during the COVID pandemic. So right now, even without COVID being a part of the narrative, I mean, every parent goes through this. And then I think right now we're really all having to have dealing with some sort of whiplash trauma, trying to get out of that season. It was very taxing on everyone emotionally, mentally, and physically. So that's one thing that has come out recently. Another survey in 2019 by Today and SurveyMonkey found that 75% of working moms reported feeling stressed, 72% felt tired, and 64% felt overwhelmed. So like everybody. In another 2020 survey by Motherly, they found that 92% of moms reported feeling burnt out, 68% reported feeling overwhelmed. And in 2020, another survey by Motherly found that 68% of mothers reported feeling distracted by their smartphones while spending time with their kids. And in 2019, a survey by Today.com found that 78% of working moms reported feeling distracted at work due to their parenting responsibilities, and 59% reported feeling guilty about not being able to focus on their children when they are at home. So whether you're an at-home parent or you're a stay-at-home mom, irregardless, the responsibility of parenting is there, and it's a huge moniker of your day-to-day existence, how you show up, how you're feeling, how you're relating to the world, and that is all just part of the gig. And I think it speaks to our culture a little bit, to the level of burnout that most parents are walking around experiencing, because we are in an age where everything is at our fingertips and we are constantly in contact. Like if you think about even just our parents' generation. I mean, I remember when it was a conversation between my parents about purchasing a cell phone. I mean, I don't know how my parents survived with kids. And that was when I was in I believe 8th grade or 7th grade. I know it was in middle school, because I remember one of the moms had gotten like the first cell phone. And this wasn't like the cell phone in your car. I think people had cell phones in their cars for a while. But I remember a mom coming to cheerleading practice, to pick up one of the girls, and she had a cell phone and all the moms were asking her about it. That is so hilarious. So I was in middle school and I'm the oldest. So my parents had 2 other kids. I was like a preteen, and they were raising kids without a cell phone. That literally, I know it sounds crazy, but it blows my mind to think about. So cell phones changed a lot. I mean, computers in the house changed a lot. For a long time, computers were only available at work. They were just too expensive when they weren't like a personalized computer for the house. So this new age of our generation growing up with being in constant contact, I think has a huge bearing on us as parents, because we either are addicted to our phones and we feel like we have have to be they have to be on us physically all the time. We have to answer to everyone's text message, email, phone call, FaceTime, Snapchat, TikTok, whatever it is. We are constantly being inundated. And so we're constantly distracted. And I have several episodes on this, just in general, like as a thing that we have to be mindful of that, because when we are in constant contact, we're consuming a lot of nonsense. So I'm kind of getting ahead, but I want to talk about this kind of goes into what I was going to say is the most obvious ways to help ourselves. So when we're talking about being overstimulated, burnt out, overwhelmed, frustrated, aggravated, like at a tipping point, high on emotion, what are some obvious ways that we can help ourselves? Number one, get sleep. You got to have rest. Have a day, even in your week. If you practice a Sabbath, which I feel like every Christian should do that, you need a reset in your day and in your week. So you need to be getting as much sleep as you can. I know it's virtually impossible. Listen, I have an 18-month-old right now, and he's never been a good sleeper ever. I've been very lacking in sleep for the last year and a half, and really longer, because, the last month of pregnancy or even longer is miserable to sleep. So I've had no sleep for 2 years basically. So I get it. It's hard, but even if you have a day where you're not doing much, like nothing's scheduled, that's restful. Okay. So get sleep, have rest. Obviously, another way to help with this is to connect with other moms, because being able to connect with other moms, having that peer-to-peer communication and contact is so helpful for our bodies and our mental health. God made us for community. So go into things like reading time at the library, joining mom groups on social media and seeing when they have their meetups. Those things can be free if you don't have a lot of money to do extras, like even showing up at a park and just being able to sit and talk to other moms where you're all kind of aware of watching your kids, but you're having that one-on-one connection. It's so important. Make sure that you're incorporating time for things that make you happy. So we all know that there's certain things that fill us up, and try to do those. Try to get those scheduled into your routine. And then the one other kind of obvious thing, but I know is a big one, is to get your kids on a schedule. Having a schedule, having a routine helps you have boundaries and expectations for the day. And that has been proven over and over to help not only us, but our children. Children behave better when they have a stable environment, when they have a stable routine. One thing I like to use is a timer. I love to use timers. I'm like, okay, guys, the timer's on. When you hear it beep, we're going to go do this. And right now we're going to work on this. They love to know what they're doing. They get very antsy when they don't know what's next. They don't know how long. They don't know what the next move is, because they're busy. Their brains are busy. Their bodies are busy. And so when you give them expectations and help them in that arena, it helps their behavior so much. Is it foolproof? Of course not. You're still going to have craziness, but I highly recommend getting on a routine. And you don't have to be to the minute. I've never been that type of person. I cannot plan my day out to the minute, but I have a flow, like a general flow of my day. This is something I actually really spell out when it comes to house schedules, when it comes to family schedules, individual schedules, productivity, routines, getting margin in your day for the things that you love. In a course, it's called Calibrate Your Compass course. I forgot the name for a second, but it's Calibrate Your Compass. I'll put the link in the show notes to that. It's really super cheap, and it's just a great self-paced course you can go through. It really helps you get a system and a routine in place that helps you become so much more productive and really squeak out margin in your day to have things like rest time and things to enjoy. It really just helps you calibrate your compass and get back on track. So check that out. The link is in the show notes. It's called Calibrate Your Compass. So those are like the obvious ways to really help yourself with the burnout and overstimulation. Get sleep, connect with moms, have things that you do that are just for you, and having a routine, having a schedule. And those will definitely inevitably make you feel more centered and more fulfilled. But managing emotions are much more of an internal battle. And I want to kind of help you, overstimulated mama, think about it this way, because when we can recognize the internal work that we can do, it reaps so much harvest and fruit in your life. Everything we do flows from the internal, meaning every action we have first starts from a feeling and a thought. So when we can learn how to recalibrate ourselves internally, we have a lot less battles externally. So the number one rule about emotions is that they are fleeting. Emotions are not facts, and emotions are not permanent. Knowing this one rule is so important because you're able to manage your expectations more consciously and can respond better to your children knowing it's the same for them too. Their emotion is going to be very quick, right? Sometimes, and it's hard. I get it. Like, think about even before you had kids, when you hang out with someone who is not happy, not a joyful person, it brings you down. So when your kid is having a hard day, of course, it's going to make you have a emotionally hard day too, because you're with them 24/7. And if you're a working mom, you may have had to leave your kid in the middle of a heightened emotional state. So you're carrying that baggage with you all day, and then you don't know what you're walking into when you get back home to them. So it's very burdensome to carry the emotions of your kid, and it can be the same for your own emotions. But here's what you must realize. Emotions, again, are not permanent. They are not fact, and they're not a character descriptor. So many people will, sometimes when you'll ask people, like, give me a word to describe yourself, they go for like an emotion, like, I'm a happy-go-lucky type of person, or I'm pretty pessimistic. It's kind of like these emotional responses. But emotions are not characteristics. They're a time and a place of something you're experiencing that is coming through. And when we can recognize that, we are able to wrangle them better, knowing that they're not permanent, they're not truth. You know, they're how you feel in that moment, but it doesn't identify you as that, or it doesn't generalize the whole day that way. I have been a person who's really had to work on my mindset, because if I like start off and my day starts bad, it kind of just makes my whole day bad. And you can't live like that. And as a parent, that is one like lesson, that's one learning curve that takes some time. But you really do have to understand that emotions are fleeting. They're fickle, and you can easily distract yourself from them. Like, there's so many things to do to easily snap out of it. Like with a kid, when they're having a meltdown, or they're having, oh, I want that. And they're like tug of war with another kid or something. If you distract them with something else, you will automatically like see this change. It's like, oh, I want to see that, like it just totally can change their demeanor. We have the capability of doing that as an adult to ourselves. So when we wrangle in how we're feeling, we're really able to keep that overwhelming, overstimulating, frustrated demeanor at bay. We might feel it for a minute, but it doesn't have to cloud and like cause us turmoil for extended amounts of time. So here's the one thing. One thing about emotions that you're really going to have a lot of progress with managing them is figuring out the trigger. Investigate the trigger. Determining the root cause of your frustration can help you address those underlying issues and find a more effective solution. So, what are some tips for identifying root causes of your frustration? Or a root cause, like a trigger, right? We hear that word a lot. It's very much a buzzword. But when we have triggers, it's always like a tell, So identifying the trigger, what specific event or situation caused you to feel frustrated? Sometimes writing these things down really helps if you're a person who loves to journal. Even we're going to talk about what to do in the heat of the moment. So if you are finding yourself in a season of frustration, in a season of feeling overwhelmed, burnt out, triggered, then I want you to do this as a full-on exercise. Maybe you do it at the beginning of your day and recount the day before. Maybe you have a moment right after an event happens and you can like journal in your phone really quickly. Maybe you do this as a debrief at night before you go to bed. And I would suggest any of those to be great options. I like to journal at night. I like to read at night. So that's usually when I find myself kind of doing this type of work, but it can literally fit in at any point. So number one, how do you want to, finding out the trigger, identify what the specific event or situation caused you to feel frustrated. Write down the details of the event, include the time, include like the place, the people that were involved, any details. Number two, you're going to explore your emotions. How did the situation make you feel? Did you feel angry? Did you feel sad? Did you feel anxious? Did you feel, out of control? Write down your emotions and try to identify the specific feeling that would be causing your frustration. Ask yourself why, and keep asking yourself why until you get to a root cause. There's a rule to this. It's like the rule of 7. If you ask yourself why 7 times, it is so eye-opening. And you can apply that to like any question. Like, why do I want this job? Well, Why does it matter for that? Why? Like, you could literally ask yourself why 7 times to pretty much any decision you're trying to make and find so much clarity. So if you have to ask yourself why 7 times, go for it. So ask yourself why. Keep asking yourself why until you get to this root cause of frustration. So let's say your kid fell down and got hurt and you went ballistic. And I'm using this example because I've done this before. When my kids get hurt, it is a trigger for me. And I think it stems from feeling, I always grew up feeling like something bad was around the corner. And I think it's just because I had very much of an awareness of life and death at a young age, because people in my life started passing away at a young age. And when I was a young age, and I saw a lot of death in my childhood. And some were just completely natural. Some were chronic illnesses. Some were all of a sudden unexpected. I always felt, and I had a big fear of having kids. I have another episode where I talk about this, but there was a season in my life where I did not want kids. And one of the reasons that came up when I was in prayer over this and talking with God is like, I always had a fear that if something happened, I couldn't survive the pain of that. And so if something happened to my children, when my kids get hurt, it makes me have a trigger. Like, I don't want them to have something bad happen. And I get upset when my kids get hurt instead of being like, oh my gosh. Now, I am way better at it now, but I used to get like angry when my kids would get hurt. That's a weird reaction, right? Like, I'm just being very honest with you guys. Like, that's a bizarre reaction to have when your kids get hurt, is to get mad, right? But a lot of times too, they would get hurt after I'm like, y'all need to get down. Do not get up on that, because you, as you know, mom brain, you can see exactly what's about to happen before it happens, them toppling over, hitting their head, whatever it might be. And it always felt like every time I told them to stop, me trying to control the situation, like, get down, don't do that, it was just a matter of seconds before the thing that I didn't want to happen happened, and now they're crying and they're hurt. So I really had to come to, what is the trauma with this? Like, why am I so triggered by that? And it's something I've worked on. It's something I've prayed over. It's something I have a lot of clarity on now. It's this insecurity I have that something bad's going to happen. And that is living in fear. And living in fear in that way, not like fear of God because he's holy and sacred and all that, not that type of fear, but just pure fear, is not of the Lord. And so I honestly have just had to pray this fear out of me, and God has redeemed this a lot for me, and I'm a lot better than I was. So that's just an example. So why is this causing you fear? Why is this causing you frustration? Why is this causing you to get mad? Ask yourself why multiple times. And then reflect on past experiences. Have you experienced something similar to this in the past that could have caused the same type of frustration? And this is kind of like linking the two together, like, oh, maybe that's a trauma I have from my childhood. Maybe I'm carrying that through my childhood because my parents responded that way to me, and like, I'm doing that too because it causes me anxiety in this way. So thinking about past experiences and when you've had a similar situation is very helpful to pull all these elements together. And then the last piece of this, when you are trying to really weed through the triggers, is to seek input. Sometimes it's helpful to get an outside perspective about this, whether it's a mentor, a counselor, a trustworthy loved one. Being able to talk to them and say, like, I'm really struggling with this. This is my reaction every time. I've done some digging, and I think it's because, you know, when I was a kid, XYZ happened, or, you know, last year when something like that happened, this was the outcome, and I don't want to deal with that again. There's so many things that we go through in life. So talking it out with someone and getting their perspective too. And I love this part of coaching, life coaching people, because I love seeing these aha moments, because so many obstacles and roadblocks and barriers that clients come to me to that they have and they want to overcome so they can move forward in their life. A lot of these moments come from this type of work where we're trying to connect, why is this such a roadblock, and really seeing and suss out like a past experience and them carrying trauma from that and not having resolved it fully. And then that's such a wonderful and powerful point of prayer. It's such a powerful point to bring to the Lord and like grow in your relationship with him and let him help you work through that. It's so beautiful. It's so full circle. And I have found so much in our parenting that is so much a part of it, being with God in our parenting, allowing him to have such a magnificent presence in that journey is so self-healing. And you can just see the healing that you're giving to your kids without them having to go through that same trauma. And it's beautiful. And it's something that helps us have, like, it's the whole sanctification process. So remember, like, just identifying the root cause of your frustration is, it might take time, and it might take some digging, and it might bring up some stuff that you thought you dealt with and you didn't, or you put it away and you just haven't thought about it anymore. But be patient with yourself. Allow yourself to explore your emotions and your thoughts without judging yourself. Give yourself grace. Pray through the discomfort. And once you've identified that root cause, you can really start to work on a solution that addresses that underlying issue, so that that trigger doesn't come up in these little nuanced moments with your kids. Now, in the heat of the moment, there are things that you can do too, because I know, like, in the heat of the moment, and I grew up in a very passionate house. We fought hard. We loved hard. I mean, I had a great childhood. Like, me and my parents and my siblings are so close. But it was a environment where we wore our emotions on our sleeve. That's not the healthiest. And it's being able to really identify in the heat of the moment, how can I deal with this? And sometimes the way we react is going to be a memory for our kids. So I try to ask myself, how do I want to be remembered? And I know that's like, whoa, but honestly, we don't know what it might be, but we all have these like weird niched memories of our childhood. It could be the way someone made us feel, like the first time we felt ashamed, or the first time we had guilt, or the first time we felt criticized, or just anything negative. And of course, we have these detailed memories of positive things too. But when we're dealing with struggles and triggers, it's usually things that aren't the greatest to think back on. But I like to ask myself this question because it puts so much in perspective. How do I want to be remembered? Because just like we don't know why that random memory, that random conversation is ingrained, sometimes we can figure it out later. But sometimes I just have these weird memories. I'm like, why do I still have that memory so vivid? And it's because it made a new neural path in your brain. Somehow that conversation, that moment, that thing that you witnessed, it created a connection in your brain that was eye-opening, that was new, that was just a brain connection that was like, wow. It was, there was a before that and there's an after that. Okay. So I try to ask myself this, because we don't know what those memories are going to be for our kids yet. And it could be these offhanded, crazy reactions that we have, or these emotional responses. How we respond regularly to our kids is honestly the emotional feeling, the trigger, to use that word again, that we will innately make a connection with our children when they're around us. Like, they're innately going to feel anxious around us. They're innately going to feel worried around us. Maybe like they're walking on eggshells. And I don't want to create that neural pathway for my kids. I don't want them to be around me and feel tense. And thinking of this question this way, how do I want to be remembered, really puts that into perspective for me. And so when you practice this, when you become so much more aware of your emotions, you have that delay. You will. And I know it sounds, and sometimes you're not going to. I mean, I'm not perfect at this by any stretch of the imagination. Trust me, there are many a day I have to call my mom and say, I feel so bad. I just like yelled at Pinks for this, or I yelled at Edie for this, or I'm feeling so frustrated. Like, and I didn't handle this well, so I'm right there with you. I'm not speaking of this from a person who has it all figured out, but these are things I have become way more consciously aware. I have these tools, and the more you are aware, and the more you do take the time to do the work, I promise you will reap fruit, positive, good fruit from it. And you will have that delayed reaction where you can stop and think for a second. If it means, there's even biting your tongue physically. Sometimes when I have an guttural reaction to something, I will literally bite my tongue. And it's just a physical response to just give me a second. If it's really you see red for a second or whatever it might be, biting your tongue physically. Of course, we've all heard walking away, but that really does make a huge difference. Just Like if you just got done cleaning the kitchen, and you walk in and your kid's pulled the milk out and it's dumped everywhere, and you want to be like, "What are you doing?" It's best to just turn, walk away, breathe, 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 chant to yourself, "This is okay." Affirm to yourself, it could be worse, right? There could be worse things than this. All those things definitely help in the heat of the moment. But I have found that question, how do I want to be remembered, has been a huge eye opener for me. Something I like to often remind myself is the reality that the more I exhibit a certain behavior, the more my kids are going to do that. I can always see a direct correlation in my mood and their mood. It's like the old saying, if mama ain't happy, nobody's happy. Y'all, that is a saying because it's freaking true. And it's not just mama in the house either. Like if someone else is in a mood, it affects everyone in the house. So when it's eye-opening to think about that, when you see yourself in your children, when it's not from a flattering angle. Talk about a pain to your heart. There's like nothing more self-reflective than when you see something your children do that's not good, knowing they learned it directly from you. They are master mimickers. They're little mini-me's. So I try to keep this in mind. I only point this out not to add more guilt or shame or pressure to you, because believe me, I'm sharing in this journey with you, but simply pointing this out because science has proven over and over that accountability is a great motivator. So when we can foster in ourselves this perspective that like, wow, my kids mimic me. How are they going to remember me? What is the overall emotion that I trigger in my kids when they are around me? When we think about these bigger conceptual visionary type of things, it makes you very much hold more accountable your actions. And there is nothing less true than the moniker, old dogs can't learn new tricks. Yes, they can. If you don't want your children to deal with the same traumas and things that you've dealt with, you have to fix it. You don't have a choice. And so thinking about how your kids will mimic you, even take it a step further and say, how will my kids treat my grandchildren? That one will really get you. Your kids learn by example. And even though we are all going to have our moments, the key is apologize, recognize your mistake, be humble. I am the first and very quickly to apologize when I don't handle something well. And that's a practice thing because I want my kids to know, listen, I'm aware that is not how you act. Don't do that, what I just did. Simply apologize, but recognize that. And then just use that as a motivator. Hold yourself accountable to that. And know that we have the ability to change. We have the ability to do things differently. We have the ability to heal. We have the ability to dig up these roots, these root causes of a lot of our angst and get them out of here. It's just like an old weed in our garden. We can dig that thing out and chuck it away. And God is here with you to do the work, the hard work, to help you, to rebuild you, and to give your kids a different way of doing it too. And that's such a great accountability tool to think of it that way. Like, I want my kids to have different tools than me. I want my grandkids to experience things differently, right? We all want better for our children and our children's children. So overall, it's like having this awareness, bringing ourselves to be more accountable gives us this conscious ability to pivot in the moment. And then if we take it a step further and do this work with digging up these triggers and doing work on those, you're going to have such a different perspective showing up every single day as a mom, a different perspective in the way you respond, a difference in how your kids behave and how they are acting. It truly is so wonderful, such a full circle thing that you gift your children. So overall, setting yourself up for success. Less burnout, more contentment means being intentional. And we can do these little things in the moment to help us walk away, bite our tongue, breathe, tell yourself it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. But then doing that deeper work. And of course, overall, we need to practice self-care. As a mom, it's so easy. We always hear to put everyone's needs before ourselves, but you have to prioritize yourself in the way that you are able to have the margin to fill yourself up. If that means reading a book, if that means sitting in prayer, if that means taking a hot bath at night, you have to do the things that help you feel like yourself. You have to set good boundaries. You have to know the essentials for your time and your energy. Learn to say no. Learn to stay in your own lane when it comes to your own self and your kids. You don't have to do all the things that everybody else is doing. You don't have to say yes to all that stuff. You don't have to be involved in 1,000 activities. You don't. You can say no. If it does not fit your season of life, you can say no. You can be clear with your expectations for your friends, your family, and communicate this. Especially if you have a spouse, you need to be communicating this. What's important to you guys, what matters. Have your own set of values for your family, vision, and know yes, we want our kids to play sports, but we don't want them to do travel ball. That's just an example, right? We want to have more flexibility on our weekends than going and sitting at a ball field every day. It's just different things, but figuring out your yeses and your nos, and obviously getting into a routine. Like I mentioned before, time management is such a key for overstimulated moms. Having a schedule, having a routine, sticking to it as much as you can, using time blocking. If you're one of those people that would do better, timing out your day, do that. If you're more of a flow, we have breakfast, then we have reading time, then we go outside, then, having a flow to your day, not necessarily tied to a time, whatever it is, you need a routine. And then you've got to learn to let go. You've got to learn to give yourself grace, to let go of perfection, say sorry when you need to say sorry, embrace your inabilities, embrace your weaknesses, and know that those are places and areas for you to grow, for you to commune with God and say, please, God, help me with this. Practicing mindfulness. I have a whole episode. It's episode 2 of this podcast. It's meditative prayer. Go listen to that podcast. If you want one thing of self-care to do today, do that. I even have a meditative prayer at the end of that episode. So go do it. It's episode number 2. It helps you stay grounded. It helps you have a centered mind, a centered self in the midst of chaos, centering yourself on God's word. That's what meditative prayer is meditating on God's word. It's so important to be able to recall what his truth is in the moment. And just remember that personal development is so ongoing. It's important to be patient and kind. Start small. Gradually incorporate more of these tips into your routine, and you will start to see improvements. And just know that you are not alone. I'm a much different mom with each child that I've had, with each phase, with each season of life that I'm in individually and they are in as kids. Every phase in motherhood has been my favorite. There's good and bad in each phase, but it is a journey, and you were made for your children. You were made for your kids. God would not have blessed you had he not wanted you to be on this journey with your specific kids. In Jeremiah 29:11, God says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." That is his truth to you. That is his truth. Not mine, that is his truth. I know the plans I have for you. He knew what he was doing when those children were brought into this world. He knew, and you are capable. You are capable. Even when we don't understand why something is challenging, why we're having to deal with this, even when the season seems like there's no end and it's just wiping butts and not getting sleep and behavior problems and whatever it might be that you're going through as a family, you were still made for such a time as this. God knows the plans that he has for you. He has not forsaken you, and he is doing all things to work together for his good, and you are part of that journey, and you are made for your kids. In Psalm 127:3, behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. This verse tells us that our children are a blessing from God and that we can treasure them and value them. And I know that even because you wrote in this question, you are such a good mom, because you're burdened by the stress of it. And that's normal. It's okay. And I get it. I'm an introvert, so I'm literally overstimulated 24/7. And I have those moments of just absolute frustration. And I understand how draining and how emotionally depleting it can be to carry the weight of your kids, to carry the weight of yourself. But let's dig in. I know it sounds difficult, but dig into the root cause of these triggers. Do the work around them, get plugged in, have a support, reach out to me if you need to, and get into our private Facebook group. We have a community called the Bold Insiders. The link is in the show notes, or you can go to boldpearls.com/insiders. Get into our free Facebook community group. It's full of Christian moms, you don't have to be a mom, Christian women, and all seasons of life. And it's a great starting point if you don't have a community that you're already plugged into. You are not alone, girlfriend. You are not alone, mama. I understand. And I hope that this episode, these tips, this perspective can kind of help you get back into a frame of mind of excitement and joy and this kingdom mindset of the kingdom work you're doing. Even when you're doing all the small things like wiping faces, sweeping the floor, cleaning up their messes, getting their book bags ready for school, keeping up with their schoolwork, managing their clothes and managing their entire existence. All of that is kingdom work. And you were made for your kid, and your kid was made for you. And God has a plan for both of you. And the gifts that you're going to give your kid by being aware of your own faults, being aware of your strengths, being aware of God's presence in your motherhood, you are already setting your child up for success in those things. Having an awareness is so powerful. Holding yourself accountable is a great motivator, and you are capable, mama. You are so, so capable. So be sure, if you haven't already and you'd love to get your question in, submit. The link is in the show notes to submit your questions. They are completely anonymous. There's no identifiers when it comes through on the form. It's just simply your question. And however you want to sign off, if you want to sign it in some way, you can, so you know it's your question. But however you want to, I'd love to hear from you guys. I want to do a lot more of these episodes. I have some more questions in the pipeline. So put yours in there and let's work together on this, and let's form a community for all of us to be a part of. So be sure to check out those links I mentioned today, Calibrate Your Compass course, the link to our group, and the link to submit your question. Stay tuned. There are some fun things going on in that free community group coming up, and I look forward to connecting with you. Be sure to follow this episode, follow this show. Please share it. Oh my goodness, if you could share it, that would mean the world. That is the only way this show gets out. I am not sponsored as of yet. And so any tags that you do, any shares that you do would be so greatly appreciated. And until next time, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Romans 12:2. Go live with bold intention, everyone. Bye for now.